Imagine you knew exactly what to say when the stakes were high. Imagine if you understood what you needed to communicate and how exactly you needed to communicate it in order to get the result that you wanted. Imagine you were provided with not just the principles of effective communication, but the exact words to use. Well, today we're going to be diving into the work of Phil M. Jones. He's one of the most sought after sales experts and keynote speakers in the area of sales and persuasion out there. And Phil has written a book called Exactly What to Say. He's actually written a number of books, but we're going to be exploring the work of Exactly What to Say. And I'm going to walk you through all 32 strategies that you can immediately use, 32 magical phrases that you can immediately use to be as effective as you need to be able to be more persuasive and to be able to get the kind of results that you want moving forward. This one is going to be brilliant. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Change Your Minds podcast. I'm Owen Fitzpatrick, and today we're going to be diving into the world of Phil M. Jones. Phil M. Jones is a keynote speaker. He's an expert in sales, and I'm going to walk you through some incredible suggestions he has on how you can start to use language in a more impactful way. We're going to dive into 32 different types of phrases, different types of what we call magic words to allow you to be even more persuasive than I'm sure you already are. I'll talk a little bit about Phil, then I'll start to explore some of his other work before we get into exactly what to say itself. But first, let's talk about Phil. Phil M. Jones is a master of influence and persuasion. He's the author of 7 best-selling business books and 1 children's picture book. He's the producer of the most listened to non-fiction audiobook of all time, How to Persuade and Get Paid. He started out in business when he was 14 years old. He was washing cars, and not only was he washing cars, he actually set up a business where he had his friends wash cars, and he started to make a lot of money. He was earning more than his teachers by the age of 15. And he created his training and consulting business in 2008. Phil is someone that I got to know and to meet a couple of years ago, and he really is a mind full of wisdom when it comes to not just sales, but also business. And so in this particular episode, we're going to be exploring what are the kinds of words that we can use to become more persuasive. But first of all, I want to talk about some of Phil's other work and some of the other things that he has done. There's another book that he's written called Exactly How to Sell. And in this, his subtitle is The Sales Guide for Non-Sales Professionals. And he pretty much walks through what you need to know about sales and how you need to think about sales if you're not in sales. So if you're starting to transition into a sales role, this is a great book. And I'll just walk you through some of the elements he covers in this and then a couple of others before we get into the main one. So in Exactly How to Sell, he redefines sales as really helping other people to make decisions that are within their best interests. So it's always coming from an ethical place where you're trying to help other people to make better decisions. He says that everybody is a salesperson, and to be fair, that's a good point. We're all influencing each other. We're all communicating with each other, trying to get the other person to say yes more often than not. He talks about building confidence by understanding the value of your offering and believing in your own ability to help clients and some strategies around that. And then he gives this overview of the sales process, right? It starts off with prospecting, then you qualify the lead, then you present the solution, you handle objections, and then finally you close. Again, sort of 5 simple steps to all sales processes. He talks about the importance of effective communication. Obviously listening, being able to ask the right questions, being able to use persuasive language, which we're going to get into a little bit more a little later. He talks about building relationships also as being important. That's really about establishing trust, showing really good interest in other people, and to be able to provide ongoing value to the people that you're working with. And he also touches on handling objections, where he looks at anticipating and then being able to prepare really good responses to be able to handle objections and turn objections into opportunities. And how can you use language to be able to take what the other person had as a doubt and turn that into another reason to buy? He looks also at closing the deal, where a large part of that is about turning up the urgency and making sure that you're doing it at the right time to be able to maximize how effective you are. So if you're looking to transition into a sales role, Exactly How to Sell is a great sort of primer on that. He's another book called Exactly Where to Start, The Practical Guide to Turning Your Big Idea into Reality. So this is really good for anyone who's starting off their own business. He really focuses on taking big ideas and then turning them into actionable plans. He says a lot of people start off with a fear of starting, right? The fear of, well, what if it's not good enough, or I'm not sure I can do this, or how much work is this going to take? And he says that you need to start to create a solid action plan and learn the skills of staying motivated to the best of your ability. Mindset is crucial, he talks about. And goal setting is one of the best ways to be able to get yourself motivated, because you're able to identify what you want to achieve, and then you build an action plan. When you build the action plan, he says, set clear goals, identify the necessary resources, and then start to walk yourself through what are the various different steps and in what sequence in order to achieve your result. He talks about execution and implementation in the sense of mastering time management, prioritization. By the way, if you want to master time management and prioritization, I did an episode a few weeks ago on productivity. It's going to really help. So there you go. And he also says staying flexible is really critical, because along the journey, you're always going to have to adapt to changes and to challenges. It's really good to build momentum, to start small little actions on a regular basis, start to get some momentum going, and to measure your progress. Start to celebrate small wins in your pursuit of the big goal, the big idea that you're putting forward. The other book that I'm going to mention before we get into the big one is Persuade and Get Paid. This is the audiobook that has sold more than any other audiobook out there in the world. So an incredible achievement. And this is something that you can find on Audible. And in this book, he talks about, it's kind of like there's some of the elements of exactly how to sell, and certainly some of the elements of exactly what to say, which we'll be diving into. There's a combination of both of those in this, but there's also some fresh ideas as well. He talks about persuasion. It's not about tricking people. It's about helping them make the decisions that are in the best interests, akin to what we talked about a bit ago. Building trust and credibility is fundamental to effective persuasion. The psychology of selling, he says, is something that we need to pay attention to. There's certain psychological triggers like scarcity, social proof, and reciprocity. These, of course, are 3 of the 7 principles of Dr. Robert Cialdini. So there's scarcity. Whenever something's hard to get, we want it more. Social proof, if everyone else is doing it, we want to do it too. And then reciprocity, if someone gives something to us, we're more likely to feel obliged to give back. So those 3 strategies are really cool ways to be able to leverage psychological influence. Language and communication is, of course, the most important element, and he talks about magic words and gives some examples in this case, which are pretty cool. And he also says asking the right questions and active listening are also very, very good. He talks about the importance of empathy and showing genuine interest and learning more about the other person and providing value by knowing what will actually help them because you've listened to the other person. Gives some closing techniques in this as well, and then explains how important it is to be maintaining integrity and seeing persuasion as an ethical pursuit as opposed to anything else. So definitely recommend Persuade and Get Paid. It's an audiobook on Audible. All of Phil's stuff is really short, very quick, very easy to read, and definitely recommend you get stuck in. But let's focus in on exactly what to say. And this is the book. This is actually a special sort of collector's edition, I think, workbook version of the book. Instead of, I think, 23, it's 32 of his patterns. So I really wanted to start out with this. I think it's sold millions of copies at this stage, certainly over 1 million. And I think he has exactly what to say written about a number of different industries. For example, things like exactly what to say for real estate agents. So he has a legacy of different books, which are all focused on helping you to be more effective in the way in which you communicate. So let's start to look at exactly what to say and share with you some of the most important insights that you can learn through this book. So first of all, originally this book was, I think, called Magic Words or Magical Words, but since then he tuned it to exactly what to say, and it really is a much more accurate title, and it's become a big sort of brand for him as well. There's a few principles he starts out with before he gets into the specific phrases themselves. He talks about a number of principles of ways of thinking or important things you need to get into your mind, in your head, mindsets, if you will, before you actually start to apply the language. The first thing is, he says, the worst time to think about what you're saying is when you're saying it. And I love that. The worst time to think about what you're saying is when you're saying it. In other words, it's so important for us to be able to prepare strategically for the kind of conversations we have. And more often than not, we prepare ourselves and we say, okay, I'm going to go into this situation and I'm going to communicate this message, but we're not even thinking about the words we're going to use. And his argument is, you do not want to rely entirely on spontaneous thinking. You want to be able to be in a position that you are very, very clear of exactly what you want to say. Planning leads to clarity, planning leads to confidence, and planning makes you more effective as well, which is really great. He also talks about curiosity being the fuel for great conversations. So it's really vital for us to start to ask more open-ended questions, showing genuine interest in other people. It allows us not only to connect with them more deeply, but also allows us to understand them more deeply. And that will, in turn, help us to be able to build better relationships and therefore put our messages across. The next one is people do things for their reasons, not yours. And once again, that's another important point that should be obvious, but at the same time, so often we're so busy thinking about what we want and what our focus is. Most of the time when I get asked, how do you become more persuasive? Most of the time, the questions that I get asked around that area is, how can I get them to do what I want? Whereas the real question is, well, what do they want? And once you figure out what they want, you know what you want, then you figure out a way to connect the dots. But you need to start from their perspective. So people do things for their own reasons, not yours, is a really important point. And then the final one is the person asking the questions controls the conversation. It's so important for us to be able to recognize that questions are the answer. If you get really good at asking questions, that will direct the attention of the other person, and you can direct their attention towards cultivating certain emotions, feelings that you want them to feel. There's a whole smorgasbord of opportunities out there once you start to learn to ask better questions. So some important principles there. Let me just repeat them really briefly. The worst time to think about what you're saying is when you're saying it. Curiosity is the fuel for great conversations. People do things for their own reasons, not yours. And the person asking the questions controls the conversations. Now let's get into the actual phrases. And the majority of what I'm about to share are phrases that Phil suggests for various different areas or for various different functions. And we'll start off with what he calls rejection-free openings. And the first rejection-free opening is, I'm not sure it's for you, but. I'm not sure it's for you, but. And I really like this because what you're doing in this case is it sort of lowers the pressure for the other person. It means that you're overcoming this psychological principle we call reactance. And reactance is this natural propensity we have to say no to someone else when they're trying to convince us to do something. So reactance is the desire we have to be able to maintain our own autonomy and our own independence, and therefore reject what another person is trying to make us do or trying to get us to do or trying to ask us to do. And when you say, I'm not sure it's for you, but, it lowers that reactance and it makes the listener feel a lot less defensive as a result. And a good example here is, I'm not sure if it's for you, but we have a new project that could use your expertise. I'm not sure it's for you, but we have this new product that is designed to be able to help people to do X, Y, and Z. So when you say, I'm not sure it's for you, it allows you then to be able to put forward your message, put forward your suggestion, put forward your idea in a much more impactful way. Another rejection-free opening is what he talks about as being open-minded. And so he incorporates open-minded in the sentence. And he says, would you be open-minded about? Or some variation of that. Would you be open-minded about? And the reality is this sort of works based upon the fact that we generally have a perceived or desired identity, where we either see ourselves as open-minded or we want to see ourselves as open-minded. And if we see ourselves or want to see ourselves as open-minded, then we're much more likely to say yes to whatever will make us look like that. And so the example here would be, would you be open-minded about exploring a new approach to our sales strategy? Would you be open-minded about trying this new mattress? Or would you be open-minded about whatever it is, coming on this vacation? By asking them would they be open-minded, they're much less likely to see it as an immediate request that they have to say yes or no to, and they're much more likely to at least say yes, they'd be open-minded to it, which means you've made a little bit of progress with them as well. So another great way of reducing reactance and enhancing the likelihood that they'll say yes because you're connecting it to their perceived or desired identity. The next one is who do you know? And who do you know is a great way. You're really looking for referrals more often than not. So who do you know kind of shifts the focus away from the direct ask to a more indirect approach. So you're just asking them, who do you know that might benefit from this? Who do you know that might be interested in joining our team? Who do you know that might be a good fit for this community? Who do you know is a great sort of referral question, and it's more likely to get people to respond favorably because they're not asked to commit themselves, but they're asked to be able to identify someone that they might be able to help by referring them on. It also, again, to a degree, connects with the identity, because it's like saying to them, you're a person that knows lots of people, so who might you know that might be a perfect fit for this? So you end up getting the opportunity to be a bit of a matchmaker, which is cool. Everyone wants a matchmaker. Who do you know that might be a good fit for this person? You could literally change lives with this one. The next one is less of exact words and more of a sort of a pattern, and it's opening fact question. And in this one, what you do is you start with some sort of opening statement to grab the attention and to make it so that they're waiting for what comes next. Then you go in and you provide a fact to establish credibility, and then you finish with a sort of a question. So just to give you an example, I recently read an interesting study on work from home productivity. It showed that employees working from home are 13% more productive. What has your experience been with remote work? And what's good about this is you're sort of leveraging the power of authority with the fact. You're grabbing their attention with the initial hook, with the opening statement that you make. And then the question is directed then on what you want them thinking about. So instead of just telling them to do something or asking them to do something, you're creating a sort of opening. You're giving them the fact, which immediately makes them much more likely to perceive whatever it is that you're saying is true. And then you're asking a question, getting them thinking about it. So it's much more effective at getting people to start to take what you're saying, pay attention to it, and to take it seriously as well. So some great rejection-free openings there. He also has some patterns called perspective changers. And perspective changers, there's some examples here. The first one is, what do you understand? And this is something which is a really useful question because it taps into what Phil was mentioning in his principles about the importance of curiosity, right? Asking questions to be able to try to understand the other person. What is it that they understand about this? And there's another question as well there. What is your experience with? Or what do you understand about? Or what is your experience with? Both of these questions are great, and they're connected very much to a field of study called street epistemology and deep canvassing. These are two different methodologies or approaches in persuasion. Now, this is not necessarily where Phil got them from, because Phil's been talking about this the same length of time as these two fields. But in both of those fields, and both of those fields are mentioned more in the great book by Dave McRaney called How Minds Change. And in it, in street epistemology, which is really asking questions and helping people to change beliefs through conversations with them, asking questions, as well as deep canvassing, which is the philosophy and the skills that are taught to people when they go out and their goal is to be able to change minds on the campaign trail. So whenever they're trying to get some changes in terms of on social issues and how people vote, they're being trained in these skills of deep canvassing. And in a nutshell, it's the ability to be able to demonstrate respect for the other person's perspective, share your own point of view, and to be able to hopefully, through doing that in a respectful manner, help to change and shift their point of view or perspective. That's sort of deep canvassing. And street epistemology is asking questions, kind of like Socrates, to be able to start to drill down to exactly what the person thinks, so we're able to clarify exactly what is true and what isn't true. But in both cases, at some point you're asking, what is your understanding of? Because you want to understand how they're thinking about it. And the beauty of this is that as you ask that question, more often than not, they'll start to go, well, and they'll start to realize that their understanding might not be as tight as they think. Because a lot of times we just convince ourselves of stuff without really thinking it through. And that's important for us to recognize. And what is your experience also gets them to recognize that their experience might be just their experience. And as they share it, it also helps you understand their point of view as well, which means you're much better at communicating. So some examples here. What do you understand about our new product launch? What is your experience with project management software? So those are some examples of those two. Another one is called How Certain Are You? And this is the field of motivational interviewing, that it's sort of coming to a similar conclusion as this. When you say, how certain are you? That sort of challenges the certainty that the person has in their prior belief. So if they believe that they don't need something and you say, how certain are you that you'll never need this? They're much more likely to go, well, and they'll notice that they're not 100% certain. Now with motivational interview, and what you would do then is you would go, let's say they say, well, I'm 90% sure. What motivational interviewing would do is you go in and you go, okay, why did you say 90% and not 100%? So you draw attention to the 10% difference between certainty and not certainty, which is quite interesting. So sometimes that's what you're going to be doing. You're going to be challenging the other person's perspective in that way. But that question, how certain are you, is a great question because it just sows the seed of doubt at that particular time. So how certain are you that this marketing strategy will succeed? Gets them thinking to themselves, well, maybe we need to rethink this. In terms of these kinds of questions, another one is, when was the last time? And this really gets them to reflect in a specific way on something that they've done before. So when was the last time you reviewed our customer feedback? Getting them thinking about that is a really, really great approach, because what you're looking to do with this particular pattern, when you say, when was the last time, you're getting them to imagine themselves back in that situation, and you're able to draw the same kinds of emotions that were existing then. Also, if you say, when was the last time, and it's been way, way, way long ago, that will then in turn make them less certain of whatever belief they had as well, whatever example they were giving at that moment in time. How important is it is another great one. When you say, how important is it, that allows you to prioritize what's most important to them. And it really helps you then to be able to communicate in a very relevant way, because once you know what's most important to them, then you can communicate with them with that in mind. So you can speak the language that they need to hear for them to want to say yes. And so how important is it to increase their social media presence? How important is it for you to be able to get a good night's sleep? By you asking these questions, you're asking them to be able to define just how important it is from their perspective. Next one is, could it be possible? And could it be possible is a great one, because when you ask, could it be possible? Almost invariably, the answer is yes. So could it be possible that we're missing out in a key market segment? This is really good if you want to say a particular phrase and you want to put a point across, but you don't want to make it sound like you're telling them this. So it's like, if you were to say, we're missing out in a key market segment, well, now you're being controversial. Now you're being combative. Now you're making a potentially contentious statement. But if on the other hand, you say, could it be possible that we're missing out on this key market statement? Well, of course it's possible. And that is a soft way of putting it forward in that way. And another one is, how would you feel if? How would you feel if? And this is great because what we're doing here is we're triggering what Aristotle would call pathos, the emotional argument, the emotional appeal. Because as soon as you say, how would you feel if, you're getting a sense as to what their emotions are going to be. And by doing so, you're understanding and improving your capacity, your ability to empathize with them. So how would you feel if we extended the product deadline? That gets a sense as to what their feelings are going to be, so you can immediately deal with them at that moment in time. Because they could turn around and say, oh, I'd feel outraged, in which case, cool, well, we're not going to do that, right? Or you could go, how would you feel if, and then you paint this beautiful picture. How would you feel if all of your problems were solved with this? And they go, oh, I'd feel amazing. Again, you're cultivating that emotion. So you can use it to test their emotions, or you can use it to create emotions, or both. Just imagine is another one, and that's immediately triggering the imagination, getting them to go inside their mind and vividly imagine whatever it is that you want them to do. So instead of just telling them something's going to happen, once again, a little bit like, how would you feel if? Just imagine if we doubled our sales the next quarter. Just imagine if we doubled our sales in the next quarter. Just saying that makes them significantly more likely to imagine themselves doubling their sales in the next quarter, which is really, really cool. If then is this sort of logical argument that you're setting up for them. So you're saying, if we do this, then can we do that? Or you could use an example of, if we invest in new technology, then can we improve our efficiency? And just by asking questions like this, you're able to create a sort of a conditional response for them. But that's not the only way you can use this. You can also go, if we do X, then we can do Y. So we need to do X before Y. And so what you're trying to do is you're trying to get them to do X. So if we're taking the exact same example, but we're just changing it to this approach, we would say, if we invest in new technology, which is what you want them to do, then we can improve our efficiency, which is what they want. So you understand what they want, that's B. You understand what you want, that's A. And you say, if we A, then we can B. Very straightforward, very cool, but immediately it links what you want them to do with what they want, which is really ethical influence at its best. Next, we have what he calls assumptive frames. And these are very similar to, in NLP, what we call presuppositions. And once again, the difference here is Phil's giving specific sort of words and language, phrasing really, to be able to use this. And it's very much focused around sales. But in most cases, these are examples also of presuppositions. So when would be a good time is a powerful question to ask, because you're assuming that there will be a good time moving forward, and you're assuming that they're going to be okay with your request. When will be a good time to discuss this new project? When will be a good time for us to talk about this particular product? You're trying to get them to think about it as a given. The only question is, when is the good time? As opposed to, will there be a good time? Which demonstrates uncertainty. I'm guessing you haven't gotten around to is sort of something that will softly challenge the person on something maybe that they were supposed to do. But I'm guessing you haven't gotten around to as a sort of a soft way to challenge them and get them to recognize, well, actually, they haven't done what it is that they need to do when they need to do it. So hopefully it will prompt action from that perspective. You're not saying, I can't believe you haven't gotten around to it. You're saying, I'm guessing you haven't gotten around to it yet. And it's assuming that they will as well. You have 3 options. Which one is going to be easier for you? So you can give people a number of different options. You can option A, option B, option C, and you can really steer the direction in which they're going to decide by making sure that as you describe each option, you're making one of them easier than the other 2. And then you ask the question, what's going to be easiest for you, or what's going to be easier for you? So it allows them to simplify everything you're talking about. It allows them to simplify it all, and it makes it easy on their brain to make the kind of decision that they want. So you have 3 options. What is going to be easier for you? Great way to do things. And the last one here is the 2 types of people. There's 2 types of people out there. There's people who are closed-minded, and there's people who are open-minded. There's people who like this. There's people who don't like this. There's people who want to improve. There's people that are happy where they are. You're given the person 2 choices. One of them is really the kind of choice that you want them to make. So it creates a sort of a dichotomy, and then they only have one choice. Which group are you going to be part of? Are you going to be part of the people who want to grow and improve? Are you going to be part of the people with a fixed mindset? Are you going to be part of the people that continuously work together effectively? Are you going to be part of the people that just keep working in their own silos and doing their own thing? You're giving them the choice, but it's sort of almost like a false choice, because you're assuming they're going to pick one over the other. You say, generally, I find there's 2 types of people. There's people that love the Change Your Minds podcast, and then there's losers. Which one are you? It's an over-the-top example. I mean, although it's a fair one, I think. So, but I think it's a good example. So there you go. Another great one that Phil talks about is, I bet you're a bit like me. And this allows you to sort of build rapport with the other person and find common ground, but it's almost like, I bet you're a bit like me. And then you talk about your own experience. And so worst case scenario, they can relate to what you're saying. Well, you haven't said that they're like that, right? Because from their point of view, if they're listening to you and you give that example, well, you're saying, I bet you're a bit like me, this and this, this. Now, maybe you're wrong about the bet, but you're talking about yourself. And so worst case scenario, they go, well, no, but you're talking about you. If they say yes, well, now you've effectively mind read them. You've demonstrated that not only have you mind read them or know what they're thinking or feeling, but also that's similar to you. Therefore, you're building rapport that way as well. I bet you're a bit like me. I prefer to have all the facts before making a decision. Great example there. Phil also talks about what he calls simple swaps, and this is really about phrases you can use to change, almost reframe the way in which language sounds. So some examples would be, instead of saying, do I have your phone number? You might say, what's the best number for you? Or instead of saying sorry, you might say, thank you for your patience. Or instead of saying, you need to, you might say, what if you were to? And just by changing the phrasing in this way, you ask yourself, how might this normal phrasing sound to the other person? How might it make them feel? And what language do I need to adjust it to in order for them to have a different experience of these words? So you're looking to be able to change the way you say the phrases to change the impact that you have on the other person in that way. So pretty cool stuff there. He uses the term labeling to describe a few more patterns. So we have what we call don't worry. And don't worry, this is going to cause some controversy for anyone who's listening in from, not real controversy, just like, nerdy controversy. Like, this is not like controversy, like proper stuff. This is like nerdy controversy, because there'll be some people that have studied neurolinguistic programming, NLP, and say, oh, don't worry. That's a terrible suggestion because it's an embedded command to worry. And if you say don't worry to a person, they're going to worry. The reality is, if you know much about NLP, you'll know that it really depends a lot about how you say it. Okay. And so sometimes when you say don't worry, for sure, you can say, look, don't worry about how bad this is going to be when you start to fail everything. Then, of course, that's invariably going to lead to them imagining the worst case scenario. But if you're saying something along the lines of, look, don't worry, we got this, this is what we're going to do, then we're giving the person the ability to be able to hear that statement saying, we've got this. And it's almost like they hear don't worry, but what they really hear is everything's going to be okay. And so there's a way to say this that avoids it. So don't worry, it's going to be okay. Everything's fine. Embedded commands still work, negative commands still work. But in this case, it doesn't always have to be the way that we immediately assume it. The way we say it matters when we're using negation. And the brain doesn't process negation fine, but at the same time, the brain knows what the word no means. So the brain, while it automatically will do whatever it is you tell them not to do, if it's followed by something positive, you're still directing the brain to that positive thing. So again, just a little small one. Hope we overcame that controversy. I'm telling you, this episode's going to blow up about this big fight we're having. It's not. Nobody cares. Most people, this is one that we use a lot in NLP from a presuppositional perspective. Most people find this new software very friendly. Most people find that the Change Your Minds podcast is the best podcast in the world. Most people love it when Owen brings out a new episode. Right? I know what you're saying. You're saying, are they just facts? But they also leverage the parasocial proof. Because if you say most people, then people think, oh, lots of people. Therefore, ergo, this must be true. This must be correct because most people think it. The good news is another one that Phil suggests. He goes, the good news is that we're ahead of schedule. Because as soon as you say the good news, it kind of appeals to people's desire for optimism and positivity. So when you say the good news, it immediately primes people to see whatever you're about to say as a positive. And they start to immediately look for how what you're about to say is positive, which is really powerful. What happens next is the next one. When he says what happens next, it immediately sort of reduces complexity in the brain. So it almost, it allows you to relax because it immediately says what happens next is this. So the subtext here is, I'm going to lay this out for you. I'm going to walk you through what you need to know. I'm going to walk you through what you need to do, step by step. So what happens next here is this. It gives clarity. What happens next is we'll draft a proposal for your review. Beautiful. Now I feel a sense of certainty. You're reducing the friction of the decision. You're making it easy for me. You're making my life easy. So this is a great one. The next set of patterns is what Phil calls staying in the game. And the first one of these is what makes you say that. This is similar to what we talked about beforehand, which is what is your understanding of, that kind of thing. But when you say what makes you say that, you're encouraging the other person to elaborate. So for instance, if they're talking about an objection as to why they don't want to buy something, you say, what makes you say that? What makes you say that our product is too expensive? We'd love to understand a bit more. Once again, this is where the same principles used in deep canvassing or street epistemology can come in handy. So what makes you say that helps us understand their reasoning, their way of thinking. And again, sometimes they'll realize that their way of thinking or their reasoning isn't as smart as they might think it should be. Or help me understand this. Help me understand why you prefer the current process as opposed to what we're talking about. So help me understand. It's a very soft way. And in both of these cases, you're saying, I want to listen. I want to understand you. And nobody will not want to be understood. Everyone wants to be understood. So these are great ways to sort of keep the conversation going when it seems like it's going in the wrong direction. The next one is before you make your mind up. So this is presupposing they're going to make their mind up, but you're also sort of inviting them to consider more information. And a great way to do this is to say, before you make your mind up, can I show you a few more things? So before you make this decision, and the beauty as well is if they're already thinking no, and you say before you make your mind up, you're kind of presupposing they haven't made their mind up yet. So you're turning their no, which is a no in their head, into a, well, I haven't made my mind up yet. So, okay, I'll listen to this person as they tell me what is it that I need to know before I make this decision. So it kind of gives you another opportunity to influence their decision as well, which is really cool. Would it help if, and in this case, you're sort of offering to be able to help their ability to be able to make the decision that you want them to make? Would it help if I provided a more detailed report? Would it help if we gave you an extra bonus of this? Would it help if we were able to deliver this to your door? You're offering something else, which makes your offer even more appealing. Would it help if is a great approach as well. And another one is if I can, will you? And this is similar to the whole if we do X, then, like the if then. So it's if I can match the competitor's price, will you consider switching to our product? This is a great one because you're creating a sort of a conditional agreement. And therefore what you're doing is you're reducing the objections, getting to the point that it's almost like a conditional yes, if you do this. So now you know all you got to do is do that one thing and you will get the customer to say yes. So if I can, will you is a great example of another pattern. There's another category of statements here, making conversations count. So first of all, we have the word enough. And this word enough helps people to make a better decision. Would once a month be enough for you? It gets them thinking about the quantity. And as a result of that, it makes them much more likely to say yes to what it is that you're saying. You're kind of presupposing they're going to do it. The only question is, what is enough for them? Just one more thing is another pattern that you can use. So when you say just one more thing, it stops them in their tracks and it gives them an extra bit of information. But the reason why this is so nice is, if you think about it, a lot of times we'll be on automatic pilot. And whenever we're making a decision, more often than not, we're using our critical faculty when it's an important decision. So we're thinking through it, using our brain, using our prefrontal cortex. We're really working hard to make this decision. And once we've made up our mind, or once we feel we've gotten to the end of a conversation, our brain then is tired and it relaxes and it goes back to the automatic way of thinking. And when you say just one more thing at the end of a conversation, for instance, just one more thing before you go, have you considered the long-term benefits? Now you're speaking to them, but they're more likely to be thinking in terms of system one. They're more likely to be thinking in a more automated way. So now it's easier for you to communicate because their defenses are less. They have less reactance going on because they're tired, because they've already sort of finished the conversation with you. So just one more thing is another beauty as well. And two more to finish off with, we have a favor. So could I ask you for a favor? Can you review this document before the end of the day? And this is great because I think it was Ben Franklin once upon a time was said to have talked about when you ask someone else for a favor, it's one of the best ways to get them to actually like you, because when a person does something for you, it's almost like they have to be consistent with that action. And therefore, they're more likely to like you because they have to ask themselves the question, why am I doing this for this person? I must like them. So a great way to actually improve it is, can I ask you for a favor? Could you do this? And people are much more likely to comply with the request as well. It's a lot more personal, a lot lighter as well, the request. And just out of curiosity, what this does is it really softens the approach. So just out of curiosity, and then you ask a question, just out of curiosity, what inspired you to reach out to us? It's a great way of softening the question that you want to ask and makes the other person a lot more likely to give you the answer you're looking for at that moment in time. So if you look at all of these different patterns that we've talked about today, we went through 32 different types of phrasing that we can use for us to be more persuasive and for us to be able to be better in terms of selling. I definitely recommend you check out the book, Exactly What to Say. It's really, really great. It's very, very quick read. Even this is a hardback book, this version of it. You can get the softback as well with most of the patterns, but this is also a workbook, so you can fill it in as well. And you can go to Phil's website. We're going to have everything in the show notes. Phil's website, you can go there immediately and purchase it. Also, you can go to Audible and check out his audiobook, but I highly recommend it. There's an awful lot of stuff out there in terms of sales, and a lot of it's complicated, and a lot of it's framework after framework, a lot of it's high level and theoretical. This stuff is you heard it. It's like actual phrasing. It's so tactical. And it's not only tactical, it's also something strategically that you can bring into conversations once you start to work on that. If you're interested in NLP, this is a great sort of addition to that. It's not from NLP. It's Phil's gone on his own journey, done his own things, and these are the product of his experiences. But you'll notice a bit of overlap because, quite frankly, if it works, it works. Hope you found this useful. I hope you now are equipped with exactly what to say. So as you move forward into the future, regardless of what you're doing, regardless of the situation, you're able to access the right word at the right time in the right way to the right person in the right context so that each and every time you know exactly what to say and you get the result exactly as you want it. Thanks very much for watching. I'm Owen Fitzpatrick. May the force continue to be with you and may you have exactly as much happiness in your future as you could possibly wish.